This time we're going to take a look and see what's in a clam shell. So we have about 5 major things that we're going to talk about, although there's probably lots more, but we're going to keep this very simple. So amount of time. And the first thing is, I'm going to start with a question that was asked to Bruce a lot of times. Do all clams have 2 shells?
Yes, clams are classified as bivalves. That means they have 2 with the bi, and valves are kind of scientists' way of saying shells. So they have 2 shells. And what I'll do is I'll hold up one here. This is opened, of course. It's not alive anymore, but the 2 shells are joined by an elastic ligament that holds the 2 shells together. So they're basically spring-loaded open. And there's 2 muscles in here that hold it shut. So when the clam is alive, they're basically shut.
Clams have shells because they protect the animal inside. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct. They're basically invertebrates. They're soft-bodied animals, and they need the shells to protect them.
There's a visceral mass. Now that includes a lot of organs for a clam, the heart and the gills and all that kind of stuff. And we call that the visceral mass. Can you see that visceral mass on that diagram?
But I'll just read some of the things. You have gills, foot, heart, intestines, mouth, etc., kidneys. Thus are all together are the visceral mass.
Part of the shell that's inside that grows the shell is called the mantle. And Bruce has a diagram of one of these clams, and he can show you where this mantle is and talk a little bit about how it's used to grow the shell.
Well, I'll show you on a clam shell and just kind of point out where it is. It's the membrane that kind of covers the inside of both shells. What the mantle does is it's an organ, but it actually takes calcium and deposits calcium at the edge of the shell and actually puts a new layer of shell growth there, and it just continues to grow. We had this one where we saw earlier, these have a number of concentric rings. These are growth rings, and what happens is the mantle has put down a layer of new growth several times a year. So it's not annual rings, but it's periodic rings, I guess.
Hey, can we look back inside that clam then and see where that mantle is? Can you see that on the diagram?
It's basically right here.
Okay, I can see it. I got it. Oh, and now
okay.
I see 2 scars right there, and those are muscle scars, aren't they?
Right. Here's to actually pull the shell together and protect the clam when it's in danger.
All right, so that's a major part. That's what you cut through when you open a clam, isn't it? When you use a clam knife to open the clam.
Yes, and when you steam them, that's the thing that encompasses the body that you dip into butter and eat.
Ah, and speaking of the body, you mentioned a foot. Now, a clam has a foot. What's the purpose of that?
Well, let me use my clam diagram. And the foot comes out of the shell as pointy. It sticks into the sand or mud and then pulls the clam down to about this much. So the only thing that sticks above the bottom of the bay would be the 2 siphons, which it's using to feed and get rid of what it doesn't want. What I have here are 2 siphons. We can talk a little bit, but one brings in water and the other gets rid of what they don't want. When it's bringing in water, it brings in, the first thing it needs is oxygen. So it goes to the gills. That, well, just like us, we need oxygen. Okay. As far as the food, it eats algae, and I think we already described that. It brings the food up to the mouth and then takes it in. Something else it needs calcium to help make the shells grow, but that's in the water, and it goes through their gills and up to their mouth, where they decide, okay, this is algae, this is something I want to eat, and they bring it into their digestive system, or this is sand or other stuff that I don't want, and then they kind of have it go through their mantle and to another siphon. The two siphons that they have are in current that brings stuff in, and X current that gets rid of what they don't want, appropriately named. So that's just the process of the clam. Now, what they do is they dig into the sand or mud, and they just sit there with the siphons up, and they filter feed. A hard clam can filter about 5 gallons of water a day.
Okay, so just to review then, we've talked about 5 different parts of the inside of a clam: the mantle, which grows the shell; the foot, which helps to pull it down into the sand; the siphons, which take in the water; the adductor muscles, which keep the clam shell closed. So those are the big important parts. I think maybe that's it for now.
Sounds good to me.